Gospel according to St. Mark. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, you may be seated. Well, I'm hoping today you can hear a little bit better than the last 2 Sundays. I wanted to offer a word of explanation. The last 2 Sundays you haven't hardly been able to hear the spoken word, because we found out this week that with one of the power surges, those speakers had been taken out, 2 of the amps had been taken out, and the mix of the speakers had all gotten scrambled. So we spent a couple hours in here this past week with Rob and I and the sound tech, and hopefully it's much improved today from last Sunday. And if you would like to hear last Sunday's sermon, it's available on the website. The recording is nice and clear. So today what I have to say is this: "Avast, me hearties, shiver me timbers. The time has come around once again. There's a holiday coming this week. Wednesday, September 19th, is International Talk Like a Pirate Day." Now, if you're not familiar with this holiday, you're probably doing things that are actually important. But if you're in a habit of wasting time surfing the internet, looking for odd and amusing items, then maybe you have stumbled across this silly excuse for a holiday. It's a day devoted to talking like a pirate just for fun, because it's funny and because you can. Just be careful not to call your friend a scurvy bilge rat, or she may be sending you to Davy Jones' locker. I spoke about this several years ago, and I wanted to revisit it again today, because ever since that Sunday, every time this passage from James is in our lessons, for me, for some reason, pirates come back to mind. Well, Talk Like a Pirate Day was invented by a couple of guys. Big surprise there. They picked September 19th because, as they said, it wasn't cluttered up by Christmas or Thanksgiving or Super Bowl Sunday, really important things. And for years, the two of them celebrated this Talk Like a Pirate Day on their own, just talking to each other like this. But then Dave Barry, a humorist, caught word of it, and he wrote a column, and from there it took off. Dave Barry thought the idea was so original and unusual that he said the creators of the day probably needed to be on medication. Talk Like a Pirate Day has become an international event. There's even an official website talking about Talk Like a Pirate Day activities around the globe. There's a set of guidelines that have been created for the workplace. And of course, there are pirate vocabulary lists and pirate name generators on the website. And if you need a pirate name generator, in between services, Sammy Mikulski got this one. I guess it's from back when we did Pirates of Penzance. There's a name generator on the poster in the sacristy. Or you can make up your own pirate name by putting Mad Dog or Iron or a color in front of your name. The best colors are black or red because, burnt umber and persimmon just don't seem to roll off the tongue quite as well. Well, given that Talk Like a Pirate Day is just around the corner, it's fitting that today's passage is the advice from James about taming the tongue and how we use the power of our tongue. Look at ships, James says, sounding a little like a salty sea dog himself. Look at ships, he says, though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they're guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member of the body, yet it boasts of great exploits. The tongue is a very small part of our bodies, but it is able to have a powerful impact on other people, for good or ill. Think about the power of words you have heard or even spoken over the course of your life. A teacher or a parent says, well, girls just aren't good at math. A coach says, you're too small to be a football player or a basketball player. The cool kid in school says, you are such a loser. A parent says, you'll never accomplish anything. Or that girl will never amount to anything. And even worse things, more inhibiting, more crippling words that slip from our lips that forever impact and shape a life. Some of the developmental specialists here in the congregation can correct me, but I think I remember hearing that a child's sense of self, of who they are, and whether the world is a safe and positive place or not, that sense of self is developed by the age of 4. And some of the words that kids hear directed at them. James knows the devastating power of words, which is why he says, how great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. He knows the tongue can be used to discourage, deceive, and destroy the precious children of God. He calls the tongue a restless evil, full of deadly poison. The challenge for us as followers of Jesus Christ is not to talk like a pirate, but to talk like a child of God, a follower of Jesus, a Christian. That means we use our tongues to build up, not tear down. James says it's not fitting for us to use our tongues to sing praises to God one minute and then slander another person in the next. I know it sounds like a small thing, but words can be powerful weapons to destroy or powerful tools to build up others. To talk like a Christian, then, means we need to be mindful of our words. We need to speak to other people with a full awareness that this other person we are speaking to or speaking of is created in God's image. This means we see others not as scurvy bilge rats, but as human beings, created in the image and likeness of God, breathed into being with the very breath of God. And that image and that breath includes you and the person you disagree with. There is a sacredness to each human being that comes straight from the Creator. Remember how Jesus said, when you do it to one of the least of these, you do it to me? I know it's difficult to see the image of God in a person who has committed horrendous crimes, or in someone who has hurt you, or even in the face of people your crowd despises. But I tell you, it is there. And that's why James invites us to be mindful of what comes out of our mouth. It is something that has power to build up or tear down. So the challenge is not only to eliminate the bad, but also to increase the good. As much as words of hatred, insult, or slander can destroy another person, words of appreciation, forgiveness, and love can have a powerful impact on others for the good of the whole world, especially when we're young. We, the baptized people of God, have been blessed to be a blessing. God has named us and claimed us as His very own in baptism, named us heirs of the kingdom. He has called us beloved and capable, and declared that we are important to Him. May we and our words be just that kind of blessing to all whom we encounter, so that God's kingdom grows in us and through us, and to God be the glory. Aye.